Welcome to the Talking Toughness series of podcasts, where we examine the mental toughness concept with guests from a wide range of sectors, illustrating that our mental approach to what happens to us and around us matters for all of us. Our guests come from the worlds of business and public service, education, social mobility, sport, and health. They all share their experiences and their observations about the factors that have enabled them to survive and to thrive on their journey through life. Many guests have gone further and incorporated the concept into what they do as coaches, trainers, managers, and leaders, helping others to thrive in their turn. Their experiences are valuable to those of us who strive to do the same. Our guest today is Stella Petru-Concha. Stella is the CEO of talent agency Rio Group. She's an author and she's an industry authority. Stella is an Australian entrepreneur and influencer in the leadership and people development sphere. She started her career in medicine, but she found a calling elsewhere. She co-founded award-winning Rio Group in 2009, and within 10 years, she was named one of Australia's top 10 female entrepreneurs. She chairs CEO consortiums. She's an advisor to many C-suite professionals and executives. She sits on industry advisory boards. She consults with business schools and is a strategic advisor to many industry boards and to multinationals. Stella is a published author of Stoneheart, Lightheart, The Intelligence of Self-Mastery. Stella is a respected thought leader, business school guest lecturer, and a leadership authority in human development across the talent life cycle, from the university classroom to the executive boardroom. She brings a unique and powerful human perspective to talent attraction, retention, and career development. Wow. Welcome, Stella.
Yeah,
Thank you,
welcome, Stella.
Doug. Thank you, John. That was awfully long.
You've obviously done so much. That's why. So
Yeah.
I
I
should
was
have
thinking
added in
that
the kids too.
yeah, I mean kids as well. Wow. Um, I'm gonna sort of launch in probably with the some of the more recent stuff there. Stoneheart, Lightheart, Intelligence of Self-Mastery. God, that's an intriguing title. What what does that mean?
Well, let's just go with the byline, The Intelligence of Self-Mastery. So the book's about self-mastery. So taking you on a journey from, information to knowledge, knowledge to wisdom, wisdom to intelligence. So I guess with any concept, I mean, you're an academic, there's lots of information out there, but how do we turn that information into intelligence? And there's a process to get there. And when we think about self-mastery, we don't go to school to learn about ourselves. We go to school to learn about a lot of the external things that happen. And we end up as adults really unaware of things that we need to be quite aware of, like our own value system and how they get created as children, and as children, how our behaviours manifest as a result of our belief systems, whether those belief systems are serving or not. How do we change those belief systems? Our relationship with failure. We know that failure is the pathway to growth, and that without failure we can't grow, and yet we really objectify success and we minimize failure, and yet failure is the pathway. Failure is the opportunity. So the book is a journey through, a meandering journey through something that I call self-mastery. Stoneheart refers to the mental toughness side that you need to be able to master yourself, which is around detachment, mastering your ego, recovering from failure. Whereas Lightheart changes its pace a little bit. Lightheart is really around connecting with the deeper I. So when you sit back in your seat of consciousness and you are aware of your thoughts, that awareness is the I. And it's a different pathway. So that's what the words Stoneheart, Lightheart refer to. But I just thought it was catchy, right?
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. To be honest, it probably reflects our own understanding of mental toughness and the way it's changed over the years as well. Where when it started out as a as a construct. It started out with Professor Peter Clough on a rugby league field thinking, oh geez, these guys are really big and I'm terrified. Like how do I not be terrified of them? So it started out, that's pretty much the Stoneheart part of it. You know, how do these other people have that aspect? And then, yeah, through years of research and practice and engaging with people, you kind of realize that, yeah, there's sort of I suppose the fancy word there is an orthogonality, but, you know, like there's an independence there between the elements of sensitivity and awareness and, you know, that sort of softer insight element. So yeah, that kind of resonates really well.
My primary job is not to be an author. I'm a CEO. I sit on boards, and I'm not an academic. But a lot of organisations, I mean, I'll speak to you now as a recruiter. I place CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, CMOs, executives in large listed businesses, and I asked to speak to team about self-mastery with a specific focus on things like stress tolerance and grit and recovery from failure, you know, being able to love yourself even though you're not winning, and all of these concepts that, like you said, John, you know, 20 years ago were kind of burly concepts, or, you know, they're not even concepts that we talk about, but now we're leading with this conversation, and it's wonderful that we're leading with this conversation because it's real. And I mean, I'm hoping that it's being brought back into the school system, because we're lagging. The adults are lagging.
Yeah.
The kids are good. The kids are getting better because the schools are teaching it, but we need to get better, I think, in corporate.
And I wonder about that, Stella, because we in our development mental toughness book, we open up with this like fallacies about mental toughness, and one of the first ones, it's people think it's this sort of macho, you know, can't have weakness, whereas the phrase we always use is being comfortable in your own skin. It's actually being tough isn't about not having any vulnerability and insecurity, but it's being okay with it and actually recognizing, yeah, sometimes I feel this way and that's fine. That doesn't put me off, because ultimately that's what keeps people going and pushing themselves. Are we there yet, or are we far away in terms of culturally the organizations that you might have worked with in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd like to talk about this concept around mental toughness being tough versus soft. And I think that I think the vernacular that we're using is a bit immature, because, and you know, maybe it's because we use the word mental toughness, right? But if we step back and we actually understand how can we be comfortable in our own skin? You know, how can we be okay when things aren't okay? And the word that comes to mind, and the idea that I've explored, is detachment. Not emotional detachment from loving, but the detachment from the judgments of others, detachment from the moments where you might not succeed, failure. And it's the space between I'm attached to what you think of me, or I'm attached to getting that certain outcome, and I'm attached, which actually lowers your resilience because it lowers your risk tolerance, it lowers your desire to have risk. You know that, you know, through obviously the testing that we do. And I like to teach and have conversations with people around, well, you know, are you attached to the idea that you're bringing to the table right now? Because if you are, that will lower your resilience. You know, your attachments to things actually makes you weaker than stronger. And I think that these are really, I think they're beautiful things to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely way of phrasing it, that kind of detachment. And I suppose that's where we're thinking when we talk about the opposite of mental toughness being mental sensitivity. So essentially people who are low in mental toughness tend to be more sensitive to those kind of external factors. In terms of successes and failures and things like that, if you're really attached to the acclaim or the criticism, then you're sensitive to the environment. I really like that idea of then the toughness comes from sort of detaching from that and looking a bit more internally.
Yeah, I think it's detachment from judgment. I think that a lack of mental toughness or a lack of resilience comes from worrying or being attached to what people think of you. And I'll give you an example. Someone important to me sent me a text message last night and said, I really want to post this picture on Instagram of me and my husband in our new car, but I'm scared to. And I said, well, why are you scared to? Because I'm scared of what people might think of me. And I said, but it's a new car and you're nearly 40 and you're, well-to-do businesswoman. Just post it if that's your joy. And the conversation essentially said, you're living your life by the framework of thinking of the viewer of your life. And God knows how many people are viewing your life right now. It could be thousands. And therefore you're living the life for thousands of people because it's a projection onto you. And I just said, just detach. Life's short. Before you know it, it's going to be over. And if you posting a picture of your new car, which just sounds so stupid when you think about it, brings you joy, just do it. But the thing is, it wasn't about posting the picture. It was about the judgments of others on her. Will people judge me for having a new car? Which then extrapolates to this. Will I have less love?
Yeah.
Will I still be loved? Will I still belong? So it for me, it always comes down to love and belonging.
And I suppose then the challenge is because, like, the reality is someone might judge you because you can't control what other people think. Like,
exactly, and they will judge it,
and that's okay. Fine.
They will judge it good. They will judge it bad. They will be indifferent. For sure, you'll be judged.
Yeah.
And what freedom you can have if you can learn, to detach from the judgment of what freedom there is in life.
Yeah.
To just fall in love with the opportunity that failure brings. I'm going to stuff this podcast up. Oh, well, there might be a bazillion people listening right now. Oh, well, what freedom it brings not to worry.
Yeah, that's it. You think of sort of like the actor rushing to read the first reviews of their play, or I've seen many of sports people looking what score some journalist who's never played the sport to any decent level has given them. And, you just think, you could just detach yourself from that. You'd instantly be much, much closer to being bulletproof.
Yeah.
I think what you've been talking about, Stella, is really, really interesting. I mean, before I started this business, or certainly in the early days of starting our business, we did a lot of what you're now doing. Most of our business was recruiting and developing senior people in organizations. And the idea of detachment wouldn't be seen very much. I'm going back about 30 years. And there was very, very much a kind of a prototype for a senior leader. You had to be impervious. You had to wear a suit, and the suit was more than fabric. It was a mask, and whatever went on behind that mask, you weren't allowed to look at, and nobody was allowed to even comment on. So I'm finding what you're talking about really interesting, but interesting from the wider perspective because John and Peter and I are on a kind of a mission. We want to change the way people think about themselves and the world around them. And bit by bit, tiny bit at a time, I think we're doing it. To what extent do you see senior executives in Australia beginning to change?
This is a catch-22 because I'm in recruitment and I see a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to bring people into my universe that are highly resilient, highly evolved when it comes to self-mastery. I gravitate towards these people, and when executives don't display good elements of self-mastery, it's unlikely that I'll work with them. So the catch-22 here is that I have the discretion and the power in my job to be able to choose who I work with and go on from there. But in the assessments that I do with senior executives, I look very closely at this. In fact, I start here. And I talk about something called, you apply for a job, or you meet with me, you heard about Stella and you want to meet her because you want her to get you a job. And I say, show me your resume. And on the resume is your career history and what you've achieved, and hopefully you can describe the value that you've created in your organisation. But when I meet with people, I don't go through that. I go through something that I call the personal resume. So I say to them, I've got your resume, thank you, but let's start at the beginning of time. Where were you born? Talk to me about your family. Walk me through your history from the moment where you were born. And what I look at is, were they born in, city, country, parents, divorced? What happened? What's the journey? How did you bounce back from that? What was the learning from that moment? How has that connected and created your leadership? Has it made you harder? Has it made you less empathetic? I like to explore the personal resume, because that tells me more about the how than the what. It also allows me to explore the why, which is their personal vision for their life, what they're here to achieve in this world, and how does that connect? Because there's a lot of lip service. Executives can give you a lot of lip service, and you have to be pretty astute to be able to swim through what's truth and what's not.
Yeah, you can say the word
paying me to do.
Okay.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got to try and I've got to try and figure out, is there alignment with this vision? Does it connect back to their history? How does it make sense? We've got to try and make sense. I want to make sense of their why and their how, because the resume, which is the what, I'm really, we've all got a great what. I'm not quite interested in that.
Yeah.
So, look, I think we're getting there in Australia.
I would hope that we're getting there.
Long way of answering your question, Doug.
No, that's a really good answer to the question, because you've actually moved very nicely to talking about the why. And I would say the last 3 or 4 podcasts we've done, John, we've ended up with that at that point, talking about the why, talking about purpose, checking out what is your purpose, what are you trying to achieve. And in the past, I've noticed.
Interestingly, we were talking to Paul Taylor very recently, who's based in Newcastle in New South Wales. So, are you in Newcastle?
That's where I was born. I was born in Newcastle in New South Wales. Oh my goodness!
There you go. There's something in the air in Newcastle.
So maybe you're asking the right question. Where were you born? And you don't need to know any more than that.
That's it.
I guess the reason why I'm touching upon purpose is, if the chief executive of the leadership of an organization has a purpose, and it's more than I want to earn a lot of money, or I want to have 90% market share, that should influence the thinking within the organization. And that sense of purpose then should impact on culture. And when you're appointing or recruiting a senior executive for an organization, you're actually recruiting a key ingredient for its success.
Absolutely. We've got to actually triangulate in onto the purpose and the behaviours linked to that purpose. So the why and also the how, because whilst an individual can have a very strong compass for their why, if they are 20 years old with very limited how, no experience in execution, then they will absolutely not be able to deliver in that role. So I think they go together. And the how for me is very much linked to some of the concepts of mental toughness, or some of the finer elements of mental toughness, like interpersonal confidence, as well as social confidence, looking at things like your commitment to your goals across life. Not just in your job.
And I like that idea as well, because I'm always interested in sort of time perspectives, right? And I think what you've got there's the kind of what bit, to me, sort of represents what you've done in the past, and hopefully there's some learning from that. And I know when I've been in positions where you're reviewing applications and stuff like that, you're always thinking, okay, yeah, but what have you actually acquired from doing all this stuff? I suppose the how is then that's the like that more present focused stuff, and then the why helps you to judge what you might do in the future. In academia, we're some of the worst for appointing people based on their past, and go, geez, look what this person's done. We're not very good at the whys and the hows.
But that's because academia, the product, you recruit to the product being the research. You don't recruit to the people. And I had this conversation today. There was an individual that we're going to hire into our organization who is coming out of, let's say, one of the top 3 technology businesses. Let's say the Google, Microsoft, or Amazon, one of them. And she's been with them for 6.5 years, and she's changing for culture. And I said, explain to me what you mean by that. And we had a discussion around that. And I shared with her, there are certain businesses out there that lead with the product. And there are certain businesses out there that lead with the people. There are businesses that are so focused on their brand that it doesn't matter what the experience is of their people, because they worship the brand. The brand is bigger than the people. And there are organizations out there that flip that on its head. And Simon Sinek talks about making sure that we flip it on its head. We have to put people as the focus of the organization. But that's not, I don't think that that's possible across most, I don't think we can kind of, use one brush to paint all organizations with that same one brush. In recruitment, we can do that. In certain industries, you can do that. And that's where you start working with leaders that go, right, now that I understand that the people, for me to develop my business and to be a great CEO, I've actually got to develop my people. And then they will develop the product, or they will service the customer. My people first, my customer second. Or is it my customer first and my people second? There can only be one. One of those can only sit at the top. And the organizations that are prioritizing their people are developing them in what I call self-mastery concepts.
Yeah.
They're putting their money in developing them there.
So what do we do then, Stella, with the ones that the people are second? When you're in, you must have encountered, because there's still plenty around, isn't there? And indeed, some of the biggest companies in the world.
They are the biggest companies in the world. They've got the biggest brands. And look, I think that they will continue to churn and make mistakes, but I think that we need self-mastery, mental toughness, stress tolerance, resilience. This is the core of human need. It doesn't matter about the company or the school that you go to. We need to be singing this and talking about it at the dinner table, in the morning, at bedtime, not just at work. This is a ecosystem that is shifting the world, not just one corporate or two corporates. They'll catch up at some point.
Yeah, I suppose that's it. It's empowering the people, isn't it? It's people, and there's plenty of things I think in the world sometimes to be pessimistic about, and when you look at climates and no action and stuff like that. But the thing that always gives me optimism is young people. I think they're brilliant.
They are,
and you just think, I can see you can see generations coming through where you think, well, they kind of are empowered in that sense, and probably less prepared to be a subject of a corporation that says you're second and the product comes first.
Yeah, they're very detached, actually. They're a lot more detached from the value that a corporate can bring them, because they are more creative in how they create their value and fulfill their purpose, the younger generation, I think.
Do you think, Stella, we might sometimes fall into a trap of looking at people like Amazon and Google and think that represents what the whole of industry looks like? Because my experience is actually a bit different. I'll give you an example. When I first started my business, I started working in an area of the UK called Merseyside. And I did a little bit of market research, and I found that there were, would you believe, 250,000 companies in the Merseyside region, of which less than 100 employed more than 1,000 people. So there were
Lots of
lots and
small
lots and
businesses.
lots of, well, not all small, there were 5, 6, 700 employees.
Well, that's
When
quite
you
big,
kind of
isn't it?
dig
Yeah.
down to those levels, you don't see the kind of the Amazons that have appeared out of nowhere. You see family businesses that have been around for a long, long time. And, they couldn't have been around for a long, long time if they operated in the way that Amazon operates, or, one of those big, dare I say, heartless organizations. They have to care about their people. The people are first, and the people are the people who create the business for them. I'm quite an optimist, because I think that when you look at businesses, you see a whole mixture. John often talks about nuance and complexity. The world of business is complex. And again, if we're going to learn something, we should learn from, dig deep, dig into what's been working and what hasn't worked so well. Because you can look at big technology companies. I'm just trying to remember the name of one of them that 10 years ago was everywhere and now doesn't exist. So
BlackBerry.
Yeah, yes, exactly. There are
Yeah.
there are loads
Nokia
of
used to
them.
be a telephone company, and now
Yeah.
it's a service provider. There's
Yeah.
a million
HP
examples of
used
them.
to be
Kodak,
one of the biggest companies going, and now they're just a few printers.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'm so detached actually when I think about organizations, small, big, and ginormous. I think that there is a company out there for everyone.
Yeah.
And there is a role that these companies play in everyone's life. And it has to distill down to the individual and their own journey of self-mastery. And it cannot be the role of the organisation to teach it. It's not their responsibility. It's a collective responsibility. And it actually starts with the individual. So it's my responsibility to master myself and to learn about myself. Now, organisations out there can have support systems to bring the power back into the individual, and the same with the schools, and same with educating parents. And there's more leadership books out there than there are any other book out in the world. I think that this is a collective shift back into the individual. Corporates have a role, leaders have a role, managers have a role, and you can be a great manager in a really bad company, managing a beautiful team. And there's value in that too. I try not to judge all of the different variations, to be honest with you, because I think it just distills down to the individual.
Something's just suddenly struck me. We do a lot of work in education, and we do a lot of work around what you're talking about. It's rarely about an opportunity. It's nearly always for dealing with a problem or a crisis. It's about retention. It's about employability. They can't get a job. So how do we show them how to get a job? It's how to deal with the stress of being on a course. It's not, I would say, more positive or more proactive than that. It's about, we're going to teach you life skills. We're going to teach you something now that is going to help you in the short term, but boy, is it going to really help you in the long term. I suppose there's a mindset change required. I think you've brought in an interesting piece of language that we don't often use and don't often come across, and that's this word detachment. And I love the idea that, about the importance of detachment, about being able to manage that. I think you described it as the gap between what people think of you and what you think about yourself. I think if there's one thing that listeners are going to go away from, it's thinking about that. And if they think about it, it could make a big difference to their lives. So thank you, Stella.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks. I'm kind of going to be left with this, no one cares, and that's a good thing.
And that's a good thing.
Stella, there'll be people who'll be interested in getting in touch with you. What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
I'm on every platform you can think of. It's my full name, Stella Petro-Concha, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I've got a big Instagram, so you can get in contact with me directly there. And I have a website, stellapetroconcha.com.au as well.
Yeah.
Right.
The
It's
beauty
not
of
gonna be
there
difficult.
not being many Stella Petru conchas around.
Oh, who knows? There might be lots now.